If in the previous video, the Houthis made the biggest mistake of their lives by challenging the Israeli Air Force, then in this one, they're about to pay the price with the first strike by Israeli F-15s. And that price is the complete erasure of the Houthi airbase from the map. From the very first moment, a single mistake could send Israel's F-15I plummeting like a meteor. And the only thing preventing that disaster is flawless precision. At exactly 2:13 local time, two pairs of F-15I Ram multi-role fighters took off from Hatzerim Air Base, maintaining total radio silence and flying with all lights off. They skimmed just 150 feet above the Red Sea, using the natural shadow of Tiran Island to vanish from all tracking systems. A bold move and breathless tension from the very first minute. As darkness swallowed the formation, the real danger began. Inside the cockpit, emergency oxygen systems were activated as the jets plunged into low-pressure zones. All non-essential systems were shut down. Only the targeting radar, terrain maps, and contact indicators remained, projected onto the pilot's visor through the Elbit 4 helmet. Not a single glance down to the controls. At this speed, even half a second off could mean slamming straight into the ground. The tension surged, like a stretched string on the verge of snapping. Continuing their mission, the entire F-15I formation dropped to just 200 feet, skimming the sea surface to evade Sudanese early warning radar. For the next 420 kilometers, the only sign of their presence was the streak of whitewater trailing behind them. From a distance, it looked like an ordinary strike eagle. But inside was a payload of top-secret weapons, elite reconnaissance sensors, and some of Israel's most advanced electronic warfare systems. All of it was about to face the most brutal combat test imaginable, where failure means death. Can you guess what's coming next? Drop your predictions in the comments. To penetrate deep without an escort, Israel transformed the F-15I into a lone warrior. The clearest visual clue: two conformal fuel tanks along the fuselage, adding 4,500 pounds of fuel without increasing radar signature. Inside the cockpit, the Elbit 4 helmet projected all critical data, threats, terrain, target flight paths, in just 40 milliseconds. This flight was the perfect showcase of Israel's fusion of tactics and technology. Thanks to the integrated helmet and conformal fuel tanks, the jets flew 420 kilometers low and fast without mid-air refueling, which would have blown the mission's cover. Their terrain-hugging ability also eased pilot stress during the most dangerous phase. But all of it only works with flawless timing. And the next critical link in this life-or-death chain was floating silently at 24,000 feet above. At that moment, at 2:39, the formation began a gentle climb over international waters south of Port Sudan, having completed a 470-kilometer leg. Ahead lay Yemeni airspace, where Iranian radar nets and surface-to-air missiles were waiting. The 4 F-15I jets split into two pairs, separating directions to avoid ambush or cover for any technical failure. At exactly 2:43 a.m., the silhouette of the first KC-707 REM tanker appeared on radar, holding its precise position in a zone codenamed Syrup 6. Right then, under the star-filled sky, a scene straight out of a movie unfolded. The massive gray tanker cast a long shadow across the calm sea below. Though pre-briefed, the boom operator stayed silent, unless an emergency arose. The lead pilot tipped his wing in signal, then rose up from below. The refueling boom was already extended, held steady by active tail fins. With a subtle adjustment, the cold steel nozzle clicked into the F-15I's fuselage with a tense metallic clink. As the refueling boom locked into place, each fighter took less than 3 minutes to top off. Every connection added another 1,600 kilometers of combat range, a vital edge for survival. Below them, the Red Sea lay flat like a mirror, but in the distance, enemy radar systems were beginning to stir. The KC-707 REM, a heavily modified Boeing 707, now served as the backbone of Israel's strike air force. It could deliver 2,500 gallons in just minutes, an astonishing feat under such high-stakes conditions. The KC-707 wasn't just powerful, it was remarkably stable. Dual auxiliary tail fins auto-adjusted to keep the refueling boom perfectly aligned, even in rough weather. Inside, encrypted electronics managed the entire refueling process and monitored fuel flow, with dynamic prioritization depending on the mission. A data link antenna mounted along its spine allowed for real-time tactical updates mid-air. Though aging, this aircraft remained the lifeline of strategic strike missions, especially when forward bases weren't an option. Thanks to the KC-707's rapid refueling and long loiter time, the F-15I squadron could fly directly to their target. Without it, they'd need a forward base, politically impossible, or cut their weapons load. And where they were headed, carrying fewer bombs would be suicide. At 2:53 a.m., 220 kilometers off Yemen's coast, the first electronic blip flashed across the warning system. What began as short pulses quickly turned into sweeping scans. The enemy was awake. Radar waves began closing in. First came the Soviet-made Spoon Rest, supplied by Iran and operated by Houthi forces. The F-15I squadron held course, but immediately dropped another 1,000 feet to slip beneath the radar shadow. Just 10 seconds later, a second radar lit up, with a signature long fan sweep, likely a P-19 or Chinese YC-6M. The multi-layered air defense net was now fully active. The tension was razor-sharp, and the pilots were moments away from unleashing their first electronic countermeasures. Without hesitation, the pilot turned a dial on the console, activating the EL-822 jamming pod mounted beneath the fuselage. A faint whir sounded. Electromagnetic waves flooded every enemy radar frequency. On the Houthi operator's screens, nothing unusual appeared, just a few blurry, static blips. 3 seconds later, the second F-15I engaged its pod. Together, they launched coordinated pulse-jamming waves, scrambling enemy perceptions of range, altitude, and heading. If missiles were fired now, they'd be chasing ghosts. Just as it seemed they had slipped past the radar net, a third signal, with an alarmingly high frequency, suddenly locked on and then vanished. It was likely a fire control radar. Even that brief glimpse was enough to send chills through the cockpit. But fortunately, their jamming system held firm. The ELTA EL-822, known simply as 82, is Israel's most powerful electronic weapon, built to deceive, suppress, and blind even advanced radar systems without ever revealing the host aircraft's position. Unlike traditional jammers, the EL-8222 is a smart ghost in the sky. Mounted under the fuselage or wings, this pod doesn't just detect radar. It memorizes, tweaks frequencies, and bounces back false signals that leave enemy operators dazed. It can do this to 16 targets simultaneously across multiple frequency bands. Most crucially, it's directly linked to the F-15I's mission computer, allowing pilots to operate hands-free, a game changer for what's waiting ahead. And then came the most harrowing moment. At 3:06, the F-15I formation crested a low mountain range, just 18 kilometers from Sana'a. From here on, there was no cover. On radar, they were now lit up like daylight. All 4 pilots pushed throttles to 480 knots, holding a tight altitude of 2,000 feet, low enough to stay under long-range SAMs, but high enough to avoid slamming into the terrain. In their hearts, one silent prayer echoed, "Please, let no one down there be holding a man-pads." Yemen's capital loomed ahead like a grim warning. There was no time left to hesitate. They surged straight toward the target. Through the HUD, Sana'a International Airport came into sharp focus, thanks to satellite imagery updated just 12 hours earlier. The system marked every position: 6 Shahed 136 drone transporters, 4 mobile radar units, and 1 suspected command center. At this moment, every second pounded like a pulse through their veins. Each F-15I carried 4 Rampage missiles, mounted on reinforced wing pylons. Their long, sleek, razor-sharp silhouettes shimmered faintly along the edge of the HUD. In the rear seat, the weapons officer input target coordinates. No need for adjustments. Everything was pre-programmed with encrypted inertial guidance. At 3:07, just 20 kilometers from the airport, the signal came through. Weapons free! The destruction was about to begin. In just half a second, the first missile roared off the rail, followed by 7 more in rapid succession. Each launch came with a piercing screech and a flash of white fire ripping through the night. The Rampage missiles shot forward at Mach 1.5, banking slightly northeast along preset coordinates. In the cockpit, the pilots held their course without flinching, not even as enemy radar lit up wildly from 3 separate tracking systems. Now, everything rode on speed and devastating impact. And trust us, the biggest surprises are still ahead. Watch the video till the end. Just 28 seconds later, the first missile struck a fuel depot, erupting into a blazing red fireball. 3 seconds after that, the hangar detonated. Then came the drone storage and the command center, all obliterated into ash. Each explosion lit up the night like a seismic flash of light. The pilots pulled hard southward. Radar warning sirens screamed. They were now locked on. But by then, they had already done the unthinkable, striking the very heart of an air defense network without being detected beforehand. There was no time to think. Each pilot deployed chaff flares, then immediately broke formation to throw off enemy radar. The split flight tactic sent Houthi air defenses into disarray, unable to maintain a stable lock on any target. Turning back and diving wasn't an option. They were already at the missile's ceiling threshold. Their only chance was to climb, and pray the radar would lose lock before impact. In the pilots' minds, every second ticked like the final countdown of a live warhead. The tension escalated fast. The lead aircraft's real-time display showed 2 incoming missiles, 32 kilometers out, closing in at Mach 2.5. That meant just 39 seconds until impact. But if they kept climbing, they'd reach the SA-6's maximum altitude ceiling in exactly 38 seconds. A deadly gamble with just 1 second of margin. No one said a word, jaws clenched, hands gripping the stick tight, silently praying no more missiles were launched. In the cockpit, the warning lights flickered like a final omen. Finally, at 3:15, the formation crossed the coastline, officially out of Yemeni airspace. But the 2 SA-6 missiles were still chasing like phantoms. They began to wobble, losing guidance. The radar links had been severed. In a panic, Houthi operators fired blindly at decoy signals generated by the jamming systems. Just when it felt like the end, both missiles abruptly veered north and detonated mid-air. Not a single F-15I was hit, but their flight suits were soaked with sweat. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to leave a comment to let us know you stopped by. The Crimson Vortex, while a decisive military victory, did not end with the destruction of the bunker. It set off an unprecedented global chain reaction. The world did not ask, what happened? It began to tremble at the question, what will happen next? At the same time, Iran sent ships to the Strait of Hormuz. Hezbollah signaled its readiness to cooperate, and aid agencies sounded the alarm about the risk of water, food, and medical shortages for more than 1 million Yemeni civilians.